Okay, and we are live. Alright, let's just see how long, Alright, so... Let me make the font bigger so we can all see it. I've had this idea for a while. I've wanted to do, like, a more extensive amateur radio project, which is kind of what I've been doing on the channel on and off for, like, a while at this point. But I haven't actually gotten anywhere. Hey, Guff Alice. So, this is me having kind of an idea that I've had for a while. I'm a licensed amateur radio operator, KD2JRT, or as of right now, KD2JRT slash VE7, since I'm actually not home. I'm up in Vancouver. So, I'm not even in my home country. But fortunately, US hams can operate in Canada, no problem. So, I've had this idea for a while. One of the biggest problems I have with amateur radio is there is no good way to send a file between 2 points. Theoretically, you can do it via TCP/IP over AX25 and then just use FTP, but there is no good way to do it because amateur radio TCP/IP over amateur radio sucks. The underlying AX25 protocol that most hams use has a keyboard-to-keyboard mode, which is designed for this. Like, let me actually start writing this down as a rationale. So, there is no good way, as of writing, to transfer binary data between two stations short of setting up AmperNet, aka TCP/IP over AX25. Most digital data on VHF and UHF, or I should say packet, not packet data, takes the form of APRS, or APRS traffic transmit, which is digipeated from point to point. From point to point. Yeah. So, I actually been trying to help. So, I'm actually, part of the reason I'm in Canada is I've been helping another ham, VA7 AIA, VA7 AIA, get on air. Oh, IAI. What we've discovered is that her domicile is probably the single worst thing I've ever encountered for trying to get a radio signal out. I can't, with some effort, I can decode, but I had to basically narrow the bandwidth right down to 500 kilohertz, which is the absolute minimum for AX25, and it was still very flaky. I haven't found a way around that, and that's in trying using a Yagi. It's possible the Baofeng handhelds that we've been trying simply just cannot deal. Their RX front end can't deal with it. Hey, Julian. Right now I'm just brainstorming an idea I've had in my brain for a while. I'm not going to be coding on this today. This is me writing out what I want and just kind of talking out loud. I'm basically using the live stream as what is known as rubber duck debugging, or I guess rubber duck designing, because realistically, just me talking about it out loud is going to help me find the problems as a single packet. Single packet. This allows for easy transmission, position reports, and messages, but doesn't provide a good way of sending a data stream from station to station. Part of this is it would be very nice if it was possible. Historically, packet communications on amateur radio takes the form of AX25 connections. However, I want to actually check the spec for this. I want to see what the actual AX25 specification requires, because I have never gotten this to work. So let me throw the actual AX25 spec in chat. My main rig is a Yaesu, but like I said, this is someone who just got their ticket. So I was hoping, like I was able to use my Baofangs to do APRS in New York. I've done that before, and that worked just fine. But obviously, I don't want to use the term a real radio because I really do think Baofangs have done more for the hobby than pretty much anything else in the last 25 years. So, okay, so basic AX25, basic comp. You know what? Let me actually put this on the screen because I need to actually read this thing. I've never actually read the specification document before. I've thumbed through it in the past, but all right. So how do I do this? Window. Yeah. Let me put studio mode. Oh, why are you being like this? I really, why is it, I really find that streaming on Mac OS, while I find Mac OS to be nicer for a lot of things versus Linux as far as live streaming, I really find that both Streamlabs and OBS have some really irritating bugs and behavior. Here we go, screen capture, add source. Source. The other window, please. There we go. Right, so this talks about the full Layer 2 protocol. Yeah, it's a fairly... I'm just going to thumb through this. So, list of figures. Okay, so abstract, AX25 2.2 digital standard. So it does support half duplex. I cannot get this to work, but I want to make sure I read it. Yeah, so AX25 is basically... it's a bastardized version of the full Telephony X25 stack. It's really been, it was basically modified because it predates TCP/IP. It basically took the old X25, put in what you need to make it legally work over amateur radio bands, and then cut out a lot of things that you don't actually need. Yeah, music's a bit loud. Music should not even be all that audible on stream. Why is that loud? Like, don't tell me my sound settings. I just installed a system update, and that... Yeah, I'm not even looping the music back. I just have it playing on the speakers near the microphone. Alright, well, I'll just lower the volume a bit so it's not too loud. So... Right, so this is talking about the OSI link layer, and then this talks about the AX25 protocol, because AX25 is, it doesn't fit cleanly in the OSI model, but it's effectively a layer 2 protocol. Layer 3 isn't typically used on amateur radio because bandwidth is kind of important. Yeah, so there's 3 types of frames. There's information, supervisory, and unnumbered frames. iFrame and AX25 is unnumbered frames. They're all they're all UI frames. They're unnumbered information, if I remember correctly. So flag field, 1 octet long, address, control, and the PID. Wow, that's fascinating. Apple Talk over amateur radio. There's even some RFCs here. What is RFC? What is this RFC? That's interesting. I've never seen an RFC that has a PostScript version before. This is a very old RFC. Just looking at the formatting. Alright. My general experience with the keyboard-to-keyboard mode is it just sucks, but I also have never gotten it to work reliably. One of the main problems is that for AX25 to work as required, the radio has to be able to switch from transmit to receive very rapidly. I have managed to do it with full cat control, but I've had a lot of radios that just, even my Yaesu base station seems to have trouble switching that as fast as the spec requires. Direwolf just kind of goes. So yeah, it goes to receive ready. So, like, there's a lot of overhead to this protocol because it basically tries to do rate negotiation and such. It does not want to be a lossy protocol, so packets is when you're in keyboard-to-keyboard mode, it will retransmit. APRS does not do that, so it's a much less chatty protocol, and it also makes it viable for digitation. Because in amateur, for what I'm planning to use this for, just as a test, is in theory, I should be able to transmit these packets through digipeaters if I don't use the full AX25 protocol. Yep. Wire pair, that is RFC 1144, talking about compressing the TCP IP headers. I'll put the link in the chat. This music does not feel appropriate. Let's see. Oh, actually, I like that one. Alright, so... I mean, like it says, it takes forever. How do I want to file when using a for packet BBS, this typically has required a simplex connection between stations due to the timing and the retransmission overhead used in. I don't know if keyboard to keyboard in, I'm just going to say traditional packet operations. However, if we design a protocol that can handle file transfer via AX25 UI frames, aka APRS, it can be digipeated from station to station, allowing I mean, I could just say digipeated from station to station. Station allow for multiplexing. What's the word? I'm just gonna leave it as that because right now my brain is not having it. So let me write some goals. I'm calling it JRT right now because the last tree of my call sign is JRT, and I feel like that's a great back acronym. So JRT stations should be able to find each other simply through listening to position, listen to beacons sent. Be able to integrate as passive as normal APRS clients. So basically, I want to be able to find. Basically, if two instances of this software are running on the same APRS network, I want them to be able to find each other without having to like put call signs in. It should be able to be completely passive. Trying to actually brainstorm this out, like it feels complete in my head, but actually putting it on paper is actually quite hard. So basically, each station should be able to send a position report and have something in that position report that indicates it's capable of talking JRT. Each station, JRT stations should provide the following. As transmitted frame should be chunked and transmitted frame packet by packet in bursts of one, let's say one in 1 kilobyte bursts. Max packet size of AX25 is 120 bytes, so this represents 256 for 8 packets transmitted, 8 minutes transmitted per chunk. After chunk is transmitted, receiving station sends signal report, and if any chunks need to be retransmitted. Verification. I shouldn't have to actually worry about putting a CRC in. AX25 itself should be, it should have a checksum. Yeah, because what I remember, so, yeah, I believe there is a checksum. Like, if it doesn't decode properly and fails the checksum, be transmitted. Each chunk should be CRC'd and compared to ensure proper transmission. So the historical problem with APRS messages is that it's like TCP. You send the message and then you have to get the ACK back. That's great if you want a reliable communication method, but the back and forth is actually quite slow, especially because there is a lag time on digipeating. Basically, if you transmit one packet, it could take, assuming it's received, it still can take up to 2 to 3 seconds to transmit the second one to retransmit it. Should be chunked. Operation via both simplex and digipeating. Digipeating must be supported, as well as any other AX25 routing. Lay provisions for future extensions, maybe even a PBS protocol built around the layer. I almost feel like, yeah, so you know what, so that's the goal. So it basically needs to be able to find each other, transmit each other, as well as provide information and directory services as we need them. No, there's no timestamps in the protocol. There are no direct. Well, my idea was honestly, I'm taking some inspiration for how BitTorrent actually works under the hood. Because you know what really sucks is when I got to Oregon, to set up your radios, you know how you do it? You have to go on the internet, which sucks. Like, in theory, we have like the National Simplex Calling Protocol, which is 144.39 here on 2 meters on 2 meter. We're just going to talk about 2 meter for right now. Obviously, doesn't care about the actual modulation frequency because again, this is layer 2. We don't actually care. We could technically bleep files over HF at a blistering 300 baud. Although, given what VARA can do on HF, because I've heard that VARA on HF can go all the way up to 4 kilobytes. Alright, so how is this actually? So there's the goals. So let's break down the transmission protocol. Transmission protocol. Or I also think I need something. Do I have a plugin for Markdown? I just want to make sure I'm not. This should basically be broadcasting in the blind, although I also would not actually having a way to use a time server. You know what? I'm just going to add that because that's actually a really useful function. In theory, you could set the clock off APRS timestamps. I considered doing that on my previous APRS project because when I was driving cross country, I had a Raspberry Pi transmitting APRS packets. I was going to do a video on this, but I decided to scrap the video because I realized that I'm showing unsafe, not necessarily unsafe operation of a car, but I'm a little bit, after I did it, I was questioning if it was actually a good thing that I did it, so it's why I've shelved the project until I can find my happy feelings on the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, that is a concern I have. APR, like I said, there is an actual limit of what you can actually transmit on a single frequency band. In APRS terms, it's called the, I actually need to add something about that. Awareness of Aloha. Let me actually write that, Aloha. Aloha, and let me actually just throw this. Let me throw this up on Git because people are going to start correcting my typos. All right. So yeah. So there is what's known as the Aloha Circle. All right. I'm just going to kill the music. Because obviously this is, actually, I know exactly what we can play. Like, where's my stream? The reason I stopped using the library I liked is I kept getting content ID'd on it, even though it's theoretically royalty free. It was the Streamlabs one. What did I do with that? Or did I do a dumb and actually take it off my laptop when I cleaned up all the files? I think I did a dumb and I took it off the laptop when I cleaned up all the files. I am going to have to fish that back off my NAS, but I don't really want to download it while I'm here. So Aloha is... So I'm actually going to copy this. right, Markdown plugin. I really gotta say that VS Code is probably, I really appreciate, here it is, open to the side. Okay, so that's almost what I want. In more direct terms, there is a physical limit of how much data can be transmitted by multiple stations in a given area over RF. By its very nature, RF communications are broadcast and thus suffer all the same problems one might have if one were to send files to 255. Current congestion of a network. Current congestion of the local APRS network, and deprioritize transmissions as to not interfere with regular APRS traffic when running on national frequencies. Currently, the plan is to keep a running average of how many packets are heard and decoded by JRT and adjust transmission rates as to keep utilization reasonable. So basically, yeah, the whole thing needs to also be able to throttle. Aloha, I forgot what the actual acronym stands for. There is an actual, it actually does stand for something. Yeah, so the APRS fundamental principles, basically the basic networks is be reliable real-time digital communications at a local net level in seconds. A net cycle of 10 minutes for local is either direct or one hop. A net cycle of 30 minutes for area-wide operations. And 1200 baud. So, all right, let me actually build this. Let me actually write more out here because APRS runs on the following three principles from APRS. from JRT node to JRT node, and from JRT node to JRT node as a caching mechanism. Theoretically, we can allow clients to receive files that they haven't requested by simply monitoring the channel and saving chunks if we receive them. All right, so I think as long as I am being very mindful of how BCP 41, let me take a look at that. That might let me see what they actually have here. Let me see if it's relevant first. That is not even remotely close to what I actually wanted. I don't need break calipers. Congestion control. All right, so let me look at best practices 41. That is not what I actually want. So I guess it's RC 2914. Yeah, here we go. Let's get it in text. That's not what I want. There we go. Nice and big. Reliable multicast communications. Technically, this is unreliable multicast. Like, the term multicast isn't used in amateur radio, but if we think about this as a computer protocol, as a network protocol, and not as a radio protocol, this is essentially... It is essentially multicast slash broadcast. Because technically speaking, you can treat this as a multicast sort of thing, and you're just ignoring the traffic you don't care about, but broadcast works in the same way. Congestion collapse, end-to-end packets using the IP protocol, connections design. Yeah, so TCP uses a window-based flow control. I actually knew that. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. These mechanisms operate in the host to cause TCP connections to back off during congestion. So essentially, this is essentially what I want. I'm actually going to put this RFC in the design doc. Like I said, I'm not writing code today. This is me literally... I'm actually probably will do a second live stream later because Factorio Space Age dropped today. I really want to play it, but my YouTube channel is not a gaming one, so I have to remember that if I'm going to do off-topic streams, I still have to do the on-topic ones on occasion. Well, Darth Looper, I want to even see if I can get this to work. Because, let's be honest, 99.99% of amateur radio folks simply use it as an appliance. And that's not an insult. That's not, but, like, how do I want to describe this? One of the major points of amateur radio is, like, the reason it actually exists is to allow experiment and design by the general public over radio transmission frequencies. Admittedly, a lot of the early advancements in radio, such as single sideband, actually came out of the amateur radio community, but realistically, it hasn't. Realistically, since the rise of the cell phone, hams have technologically been unable to keep up. There have been some more recent things from hams that have gotten broader adoption. APRS is actually an example of this. And to show you exactly what I mean, it's not called, is it not Firewatch? APRS, Fire, I forget what it's actually called. No, don't use my, I thought it was called Firewatch. It's essentially used by a lot of search and rescue stuff use APRS because it's really easy to track where things are, and a lot of more advanced radios like Baofangs can't directly, but like I saw the like Anytone handhelds now have APRS, and you can get those for like, I think I've seen them as cheap as $200 new. True. Fez F-34. The part of the goal is basically when I lived in New York City, there was the local races group, which is races and ARIs, like Amateur Radio Emergency Service, and what is races? I can't actually remember what the acronym stands for. But ARIs in New York actually ran a packet BBS, which would have, as far as I never actually connected to it, but I know it had a lot of information about local frequencies, emergency response, so forth and so on. The problem is connecting to an AX25, connecting to packet BBS is actually it's difficult. Like doing anything on radio is hard. And realistically, there are very few packet bulletin boards still in existence. What little packet traffic is still used in the modern era tends to be on HF. There's things called what is it, 139net or something like that. It's basically a data net on 30 meters, which I definitely want to get onto. I just haven't actually built an HF dipole yet. I have the room for it. I have all the parts. I just haven't put Humpty Dumpty together yet. So uh well, APRS is a de facto mesh network, Dennis Hill. Essentially, there is no central authority. Hold on, I gotta crack the window. And then I want to take this on cool. There we go. APRS by itself is a mesh network. Two nodes don't. There's no central coordinating server. It's just two stations bleeping at each other very loudly. Digipetions basically handle. There is a routing layer where you can send things wide one, wide two, or you can specifically set the station path. Um, it's generally expected from licensed operators to not be stupid. In the amateur radio community, this is what's known as QRM. It's known as or radio interference. Basically, you can there's a lot of if you were listening to any of the nets when the hurricanes pounded the East Coast into oblivion, um, there were a fair number of people who would simply get on those repeaters and just let me just put it like this: it wasn't great, and but the flip side is that there is a very high technical barrier. A and B, like there's nothing stopping you from shutting down amateur radios by transmitting interference. Using a specific protocol is neither having this available, creating this is neither a good or bad thing in and of itself. Aside, it gives more capabilities. It's how people use it, and RF spectrum is a fairly limited resource, but as I see it, having more things you can do with radio, especially in an emergency thing, like there's multiple times, like my home where I'm living right now has a little bit flaky internet, and if there was ever a major disaster that hit the Pacific Northwest, being able to transfer a file like with a photo, because the only way to do that easily is by slow scan television, which has its own completely different set of problems. Fez, yeah, it's amateur radio by definition is always public. Um, Most countries, even European ones, there is no expectation of privacy on amateur radio. It is intended as a self-monitoring thing. Like for you to legally be on amateur radio in any country in the world, because this is international treaty, you have a call sign that is issued by a national authority. I live in the United States, so my call sign starts with a K. Canadians, they will have a call sign that starts with VA or VE. Mexico is XE, so forth and so on. What a call sign refers to a real person. So if someone is actually misusing amateur radio, local authorities, at least in theory, actually in most places it is actually either a misdemeanor or in some cases even a felony. So I'm not as worried about, because realistically, if you wanted to cause mischief on amateur radio, you don't need this. But I don't want to create unintentional interference, which is why I'm designing this out first. And realistically, I haven't decided if I'm actually going to post the source code yet, at least immediately. I may ask a few other hands to actually help me test this once I have a working concept. So we have list, get, put, and type. The reason I want type is if you want it, basically if you have a text file, you might just want to have it typed. Well, I guess you don't even need to have a type command, so let me just get rid of that. Since let's solve file. I'm going to worry about the specifics of how I'm going to encode that later, because I'm going to have to probably do binary encoding for this. And one other thing I have to do is, because this is transmission over public RF, I actually do have to have a specification document for this to be legal. Otherwise, so yeah. File name, chunk, position. You know what? I'm going to have a get mated chunk position. Chunk number and chunk number. I haven't decided if I want to make everything be dynamic. I probably should do that because different modulations are going to allow for better or worse, so flexibility helps. But I don't want to actually do that unless I don't want to overcomplicate it just yet. Like, I really want to just keep this as simple as it needs to be. Get chunk takes an argument as file name. So get chunk file name chunk ID, or maybe it should be file ID. All right, so get chunk. Yeah, you know what? Let's actually write like an example session out. I haven't been on HF in a long time, so I don't know what 7.2 megahertz sounds like. That's 40 meters, right? Yeah, I haven't been on HF in a really long time. And even when I was able to get on HF, I was only able to do FT8 because of the absolutely horrible noise floor that is the New York metro area. So example session. Assuming 2 nodes, I don't know why I'm trying to be so formal about this. Let me get an example APRS packet just so I can modify it. Let me just go look at my old logs because I have a bunch in my logs. Come on, I have something better than that. Nope. Yeah, so this is basically a position report. So this would be KD2, or let's see here, node A. So that's already a problem solved. APRS, the second field on the APRS packet is on an AX25 frame. It is normally the station you're calling because APRS basically shouts into the void. It's used as an identifier for the client. Shall be identified by the string JRT JRT XX with XX representing a version number. So I'm just going to put JRT XX. String JRT's version number. Client software shall. Okay. This is represented by position reports with comments, standard by standard APRS position reports, like so. When received, each client shall record. So when it's transmitted wide 1-1 like that, it will show the path that the packet's taking. And received. I'm trying to think of how this would look. I guess I don't have to actually put that because that wide 1.1 okay, so each JRT client shall keep a list of all known nodes it's seen, possible paths to said node if no direct connection is possible. And such. Assuming node A wishes to transmit to send list all files provided by node B, the command structure would look as follows. Do I want to do this as a message acknowledgement, or do I, commands are transmitted via standard APRS messaging to confirm standard messaging to ensure transmission and delivery. Commands and control signals for reliable delivery. So node A, I need an example of what an APRS message looks like. I have a bunch. I just have to actually find it. I don't think I have the path right, but again, this is an oversimplification. I will fix this as I go along. Node B. Actually, hold on. That's got a problem. That's actually got a major problem with it. I have to think about this one. If I do it as just beacons, it's going to have problems if I do that. The reason I say that, I think I have to define a new packet type. Actually, I do think I have to actually define a new packet type. Let me look at the APRS specification. So if I actually look at the packet type, Mikey encoded data, alternate nets, generic digipeating, message in the format. Here we go. Data type identifiers. I think I want to send it as invalid. This invalid test data. Once I have this working, I will send it to the APRS protocol guys, and I will get them to give me some ideas. But I don't want to actually do that until I have something working. Or actually, you know what? Third-party traffic or user-defined APRS packet format. So if I remember, so with the APRS protocol like that, that's the data type identifier. I'm going to have to fix this. Begin. I have to think about this. Give me a moment. I don't know if I actually like that one. Because I could just send it as messages, and that would prevent any sort of things being lost, but I think I want to be able to do it as like a burst transmission. Node B, there is something to be said about doing. Yeah, I think I have to actually send more control messages because if I just send a list and have it come back, how do you retransmit? Like, this is still very loose and very kind of screwy. Chunk encoding format. File ID, chunk ID, subchunk ID. Chunks, which binary data, transmitted binary data following the APRS header. And then we just have to divide it such. So chunk ID as follows. For example, file packets. Chunks are transmitted at subchunk, chunk ID. So that leaves about six, I would say if the file ID is, I don't know if I should use a 32-bit or 64-bit integer here because message size actually really matters. Giving up 128 bytes or even 64 bytes if I don't have to is not something I really want to do. But I think I have to make the chunk ID be, I'm assuming file. I guess UN8 would actually probably make the most sense there because it would be a single bit or a single byte. Subchunk ID. I mean, I almost wonder if I should use UUIDs for this. Actually, hmm. Sorry, I was so you receive and clients. This would work instantly. Um, Denson, I don't know if I'm saying your handle correctly. The idea here is to be able to send it over APRS, not over point to point AX25 links. Because realistically speaking, you can't digipede a keyboard to keyboard session unless you did it via like unless you had an actual full blown multi frequency repeater setup, in which case yes you could, but realistically speaking, I I'm assuming it's been done somewhere, but I've never done. I've never heard of anyone doing packet for a repeater, at least in this decade, if not this century. And this century being defined as the year 2000 and later. Um, I'm a little bit thinking a transmission ID versus a file ID might be better because then you can set up the specific transmission with an identifier and then keep everything in basically in sequence. Because then you could do start transmission like I mean not like let me actually think about let me actually just like do a thought here. Communications be handled under a single session ID, which is generated when a command is sent as an APRS message, or should it be file ID based? Right now. I'm just brainstorming in my head right now. AIOC. Darth Looper, I'm mostly just doing it because I can. But realistically speaking, if I could basically have if this actually starts getting any sort of traction, the idea of being able to download information from APRS without having to use the internet is actually kind of a major win, because in a disaster you may not have the internet, and if it gets to the point where you need to, like, if you want to be able to send something longer than just singular messages, which sometimes you do, like if you want to be able to send a photo, your two options is you either transmit it as slow scan TV, or we could just put a PNG and send the PNG. That also has the advantage that because the PNG file itself can be transmitted unmodified, you don't have to put your call sign on the image like you do on slow scan television. Yeah. Like I said, I don't know if this would actually be useful for such a thing. I was a first responder. I was a firefighter almost more than a decade ago at this point. But but the idea where my thought here right now is North Carolina is right now a complete mess. When these sorts of things happen, amateur stations may want to transmit and coordinate data from point to point. Like with basic Baofeng handhelds, in theory the maximum range is 50 miles, but realistically you're lucky if you're going at 5. But a bunch of people with handhelds can talk to a single station, which then records everything in a text document and then sends it further. Now you can do this with WinLink, but WinLink requires a stable connection between 2 points, and in a disaster, that's going to be bad. When Puerto Rico got hit by Maria, I think that was 13. Radio hams on the island were able to use WinLink to get information and data to and from the continental 48 over HF, which is great. But how are they coordinating with local hams? Like, if you can basically be able to transmit information that from point to point, this seems like a good way to approach the problem, because you can also do this over HF. And it should be able to function without compromising other traffic that's going on the network. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I think, like, longer term, once you have something like this, one of the big things you can host is a chirp CSV file, which has all the frequencies for a given area or event that you can simply download straight to a laptop. So if I was in the middle of a field with just my Chromebook and a Baofeng and I have this working, I should be able to download a master list of radio frequencies, repeaters, yada yada yada, for use in disaster. Information on where to go for food, water, so forth and so on. More specifically, you can send that information right now as APRS bulletins, but a more in-depth document might be a better way to go, especially if you can transmit via multicast. Essentially, have it transmit passively to multiple stations that are requesting said data. So, okay, so Node A requests file listing for Node A. Yes. Transmission ID, time offset in seconds from when it will start transmitting packets. Node A shall wait for the transmission period and wait and receive, decode as many packets as is possible. All packets are received. Start transmitting packets. Max transmission length of a session should be approximately 1 kilobyte in size. So 1200 baud, time to transmit 1 kbit. It's not going to be that high. I mean, that should take about 5. Actually, hold on. There is a legal requirement. I have to send a final acknowledgement. Decode as many packets as is possible. If if not all packets are decoded. Okay, hold on. Transmitted size divided. Each transmission shall be divided into subchunks defined as transmission length with the subchunk size defined as the MTU. If not all packets are decoded, node B subchunks start at ID 0 and increase do I actually have to put an end of transmission? The requirements for signal identification, station identification, at least as far as the FCC concerns, once at the start, once at the end, once every 15 minutes, but every state. Oh, actually, hold on. I will be right back. Hold on. So there is actually a legal problem here. I think I need to add this. APRS messages do not always have the call sign in them. There is what's known as tactical call signs in APRS. And realistically, I can see this being used as an APRS, as a tactical thing. Node A. If node A is not operating under, if node A if no a, hold on. I think I just need to add here. Furthermore, in certain cases, the station identifier, aka node A, may not be the same as the call sign, or in cases of international operation, the 6-character limit of AX25 call signs may be a problem. For example, US hams operating in Canada must legally sign as with the suffix which can't be encoded in the standard frame. To solve this problem, transmissions shall provide a mechanism in which call signs can be transmitted separately from AX25 station identifiers in band, should it be necessary. This works around a long historical problem with AX25, is that it doesn't work with call signs longer than 6 characters, which there are places that do issue longer than 6 characters, and like right now, for me to legally operate in Canada, I have to have a suffix on there. Yep. Yeah, Darth Looper, that sounds about what I'm aiming at. Basically, if you're not waiting for a SYN ACK, you should be able to transmit pretty... by the standards of amateur radio, it should be fast. So you should be able to send 1 kilobyte over APRS in approximately, let's say, 8 seconds. Let's just say 10 seconds just for the sake. It should be faster than that, but just for that. Conversely, it would also take 10 seconds to send a single APRS message, which is 83 characters, and then send it back. If the stations have to digipeat, it may require slowing it down. No, the transmitting stations shall throttle themselves either based off transmission rates or observation of other network traffic. JRT traffic shall be considered low priority, and yield shall be considered low priority, and if necessary, transmission times shall be at the... If necessary, each transmission shall only commence... Yeah, I'm just going to say low priority, because you know what? That's fine, because the APR specification says if you send a packet once every 30 minutes, you're absolutely kosher. If this has to send data once every 30 minutes on a heavily congested network, that would be completely legitimate. Yeah. Yeah, so basically it's going to send, so basically you send a file request from node A to node B. Node B would turn the file, it would basically take a 1 kilobyte chunk of that file, it would turn it into sub-chunks, which is the maximum transmission length of an APRS message. That maximum transmission length, I'm not certain. The specification says it's 68 characters, but that's an APRS message. AX25 packets should max out at 128 bytes or possibly 256 bytes. But in other conditions, it can go as low as 56 bytes. So it has to be able to tolerate this. Which basically means the header has to be as small as is possible. So yeah, I actually think a transmission session would work, because this is essentially how BitTorrent works, to a lesser degree. BitTorrent chunks a file and then sends all the metadata as a torrent. So it can also get the information from other nodes. And realistically, BitTorrent over amateur radio is in fact a thing that could exist. I don't think it should exist because realistically speaking, not that many people are actually going to care, and it's a broadcast protocol anyway. So basically you could have it so you could passively capture chunks as you get them. So on the offhand chance that you need to be able to get a file that someone else is transmitting, other stations can simply request the chunks they don't have if they're just passively listening. Transmission sessions. Other stations that are interested in receiving information, receiving test station 1, station 2, checking coding format. So that would be transmission start. A JRT transmission starts when an APRS command is sent, are initiated on receipt of an APRS message. Each transmission receive an APRS message. Transmissions shall send transmitting stations. So you send the APRS message, shall send an ACK message back, including transmission start time, MTU, and other relevant data. Receiving stations shall send SYN-ACK. I'm just gonna say, I'm just gonna use SYN. Via a freeway handshake. Via APRS messages. The initiating station sends a start message with the JRT command, its MTU, and other relevant data in the packet. The receiving station will send back data required for packet transmission. The receiving station will send back its max will send back its MTU, route, and other information via APRS message to confirm transmission settings along with a timestamp of when its MTU route, transmission interval, and other information along when, as well as a time offset in seconds of when it will transmit packets. I'm not sure I actually need that, but the initiating station shall wait, shall send a ACK or NAC if it can accept those settings, and then wait for transmission. For transmission, another command can be sent via APRS messages, or the session can be torn down with a thing. Then, so yeah, you can wrap TCP packets over AX25. It's just absolutely inefficient and horrid, and you really don't. You can't digipede it. You can't even. I think, yeah, it tops out at 128 bytes. So like, you can't even get an FTP command in that. You can get a ping. Hey, Endata. I'm hoping I said that right. Send in ACK or NAC if it can accept those settings and wait for transmission. After transmission, our command can be sent by APRS message or it can be turned down with a thin. Stations can renegotiate via settings, via APRS messages as necessary. No transmission shall exceed for transmission. I never learned CW. I do intend to learn Morse at some point. Well, technically CW is continuous wave. Morse is what we just transmit over it. But strictly speaking, there's nothing illegal about making your own equivalent to Morse that isn't Morse, transmitting it. As long as it's publicly documented, you are legally free and clear. Although your station identifier always has to be transmitted in Morse. But I also don't know why you would ever do that. I mean, realistically speaking, unless you, I don't know, unless you wanted to code TCP/IP packets over CW, which I guess you can do. So you know, kind of what I want here is leverage, application can leverage such as providing tasks as file transfer more. In effect, Okay, you know, I'm actually feeling pretty good about that because that actually solves... Joseph, that's essentially what we're doing, but I'm trying to give it a brain because one of the big problems is with... So to give you an idea of what you can actually do with digipeating, I live in Portland, Oregon. I can through by using two repeaters, I can send data all the way to Vancouver, Vancouver Island. But realistically, I should be able to reach the city itself. You can't digipeat data like that though, because digipeation only works a single packet at a time. Yeah. So, and more to the point, this needs to be able to multiplex with other APRS traffic. It doesn't want to be. I don't want to have it. I don't want to have it monopolize the band and such, but I also would want to be able to basically, if I were to have this running on my Yaesu and I wanted to send a file, if I wanted to send something to Mount Hood, which isn't within my 50-mile bubble, I should be able to use this passing through a digipeater because I can hear the repeater that's on Mount Hood from my house. So from that repeater, I should be able to hear basically 50 miles in all directions, including all of Portland Metro and a good chunk of southern Washington. Yeah. But basically, this is designed to transfer data very slowly between stations. TCP/IP connections. Yeah, actually, you know what? I think... You know what? I'm going to say a service name and port number. For example, to talk to the FTP service via JRT, a start packet would have... Because you know what? This would let you do a packet bullet board, like an actual packet BBS over APRS. All right, you know what? I've been at this for an hour and 40 minutes. I think it's time for a brief break. Yeah, you know what? I think that's exactly what I'm going to do. All right, I'm going to take a brief break, and we'll be back. Darth Looper, I've sent AX-25 packets into space, quite literally. I sent one to the International Space Station, and I got confirmation that it was received. So... I'll be back. it is hot in here. All right, I'm back, having locked myself out briefly. Well, I mean, modems were one of the earliest uses of modems was. Oh, that's the fire alarm. I'm guessing lunch is done. Hold on, chat. In here too. All right, let's open the porch door. Okay. And that was the test of the local fire alarm system to make sure that was working. Okay, all right, we're back. Yeah, I actually think I now that I've sat here and pounded on this for 2 hours, I actually think transfer data. You know, I'm going to say bulk data between two stations. Taking advantage of digipeating as traditional station to station transmissions are. APRS IX25 transmission. Vast majority the most packet data hands takes the form of APRS traffic. APRS allows multiple stations to 60 in a given area. Units do not require a full sessions overhead. APRS is aware of network conditions and deprioritizes itself, can allow for the bulk transfer of data between two nodes, such as frequency lists, local network, local net information, and the like, in much greater detail than is possible via APRS bulletins. via APRS bulletins. The intent is to allow transfer of small files and implementation of bulletin board system, bulletin board style systems, while to integrate easily into the modern world of APRS, modern world of packet radio, as well as being easily accessible to new hams who may have a minimum of requirements, a minimum of hardware on hand. In effect, for example, frequencies and bulk information such as a WinLink provides email over radio integration, because you can do WinLink over APRS. So I'm not sure I'm actually creating something new, but and we're on hand. This also provides an alternative to WinLink, which I'm currently debating whether or not this would be more or less useful for WinLink. But I mean, just having an alternative that isn't proprietary, because WinLink itself is proprietary software. Because you can't really make, you could make a bulletin board system out of a WinLink message, but, Sorry, I'm legitimately thinking about this. Like, can you actually, I've never actually tried to do it. Yeah, WinLink. So WinLink has APRS link, which allows WinLink over APRS, which is essentially the same thing. But like I said, WinLink is a global email service. I think being able to host individual packet bulletin boards, so you can do mailing lists over WinLink, but you can't look at the archives easily. Alternative WinLink and. I'm just going to say alternative. File transfers. So let's change the goals. GRT should provide a basic communication layer that other applications, such as a file transfer daemon, can attach to, can use to coordinate for APRS. Our applications can use in a generic manner. Essentially, the effect is to be able to recreate packet BBSs in effect via APRS with a minimum impact on the use, with a minimum impact on me see what chat's saying. Well, Dennis Hill, the whole thing is designed to be basically a mesh network built on a mesh network. Yeah, James, I definitely agree with that. I can actually, I really do. I do actually agree with that. JRT traffic shall be easily identifiable. So although that should be easy enough to do for the version identifier string. Okay. File transfer protocol. In effect application, in effect from the perspective of any application, JRT okay, oh yay, lunch has arrived. JRT, I probably go for another half an hour. I think a little later today I'm actually going to stream Space Age. I did buy it. I want to play it. And we're going to basically be probably doing 2 streams a day like that. JRT operates in a store information to be expects, provides reliable communication, reliable transmission of bulk data of arbitrary sizes, with the understanding that round-trip transmission can be measured in minutes, days, or perhaps in the case of satellite operation, or minutes, hours. Because one of the ways you could do with this is this would let you basically be able to use a packet BBS through the International Space Station. For communication of 2 terrestrial nodes via satellite, with the transmission and settings being negotiated during each satellite pass. With the transmission, with both session negotiation and data transmission broken up into small sections suitable for AMSAT operation. Ooh, that's good fish. I'm not sure that's viable. I don't know how much I actually want to write the application layer, because I think I should do the everything else first. I think it should be connection ID and not transmission ID. Be sent back. That shall remain valid for X hours. Connection ID shall be sent back to remain valid for X hours. With the understanding that all transmissions sent with a given connection ID will be routed to. All right, you know that's coming out as kind of okay. Transmission interval, send back. Communicate as though it was a regular TCP IP connection, albeit one. I shouldn't say TCP IP networking. So the way it works with APRS, stations just transmit beacons. We just have to say that we are a JRT capable station in our beacon messages, and beacons are legally transmittable. It's one of the very few types of times you can actually broadcast as an amateur, because beacons are used for both propagation and to tell other people that they are there. Unlike regular mesh networks, hams have a very long history of having de facto standards for this sort of stuff. So if we leave aside the application layer, which I think we're going to have to come back to, I was thinking of this as a single application, but now that I'm starting to put it down, I realize I want a session layer and an application layer. The session layer basically acts as a conduit for bulk data transmission. You start the transmission, you start it up through basic APRS messages, which every client should be able to transmit forward and route. Then the application itself would just be able to send and receive. Basically, the application can say, I want to send 1 kilobyte of data to this station. I want to send it to this station that's running this service. So essentially, you'll have a call sign, you'll have a service number or a service ID, and you'll probably have a port number on top of that. Because ports, which are called SSIDs in AX25, exist, but they're limited to 4 bits. So you can basically have a BBS, an FTP server, or whatever you want at a given station. You send the connect, you send the back, and then you can then bulk transmit data, and the JRT layer will handle retransmission of each part of the packet over whatever medium. In theory, you wouldn't even have to use JRT over APRS. You could use JRT over FT8 if you are, or I guess JS8 call if you're extremely patient. Actually, I think I'm going to make that a goal. I'm going to make that a goal. So, but the idea is you basically, I mean, UUCP would probably be the closest analog I can think of. I mean, if you transmit that 1 kilobyte over JS8 call, that is going to be incredibly slow. I mean, JS8 call, I think it's 80 characters per transmission with a 1-minute transmission time. It's not fast. But for a lot of hams, and myself included, weak signal modes were all I were ever able to work. Joseph, it would be closer to, I want to send this packet of arbitrary length. I don't care about the semantics, just send it. I mean, if you want to call that files, great. Like, honestly, the way I would consider it is imagine REST over amateur radio, but you have but it's going to be very, very slow. So REST semantics are probably the best thing I can think of, and realistically, you could send HTTP over this link. You don't have to have it stateless, but I would recommend it. I almost should call this just radio transport. I think I like that better. Yeah, I think that would explain it. Yeah, I want to be, I think REST would be like the most standard thing, but I could also see cases where you'd want to do something like RPC, remote procedural calls. Trying to figure an actual use case for that. Wow, this fish came out really good. Joseph, yeah, that would basically be the whole point. So, again, on APRS doesn't actually care what's being transmitted over. There is APRS IS, which is APRS over the internet. You can transmit it over HF, which is at 300 baud, in which case your transmission rate, that goes into the hundreds of miles. Like like if you were to send AX25 packets and encode them in PSK31, you could realistically send it even under poor conditions. You're talking hundreds of miles. In the right conditions, we are talking transatlantic, transpacific, or transcontinental propagations. Like with HF and the right setup, I could easily reach from Portland, Oregon to either Japan or Australia. And if it's set up to work with weak signal modes, global propagation is entirely possible. Yeah, it does. You're completely correct about that. I think the application layer I'm going to kick down the can because, like, if you were to do a bulletin board service over APRS, the way I would see to do it is to transmit the index of all messages as a bulk, like the way newsgroups work. So you could basically encode, I don't know, 8 kilobytes of messages from the bulletin board, send that as a single datagram, and then the bulletin board client application would decode that. You could then queue up all your posts, which could be arbitrary length, and send them back. So that's kind of where my brain is going with this. I don't know if it's actually going to work. That is really good fish. Well, Joseph, the routing problem is already solved. APRS simply has a built-in routing layer. If I pull up an APRS packet, like a real APRS packet, yeah, so here's a page that actually talks about it. So if you look at how this is on, I will actually throw this in chat just so other people can read it. So the way it works is, in this example of classic digipeating, you would send, this is the calling station, which is no call. It's sending an APRS message, and then it's asking the station Oscar Hotel 7 Romeo Delta Echo and Oscar Hotel Romeo 7 Romeo Delta Bravo to retransmit this single message. So this is actually already a solved problem. The bigger issue with AX25 digipeating is that it doesn't support what's known as wide messaging. You have to have a specific route, A, and B, you can't do keyboard to keyboard. As far as I know, you can't do keyboard to keyboard. I believe that requires simplex, and TCP/IP over AX25, as far as I know, requires that. Although it may not. Now that I say that, it may not actually require it. But if I started blasting TCP/IP on 144.39, my mailbox would probably be filled with angry letters and other messages from other from other hams who are really upset that I am tying up the entire frequency. So a way to do bulk application transfers, basically being able to do applications over APRS that doesn't suck all the bandwidth up, would be an absolute win, because let's be honest, Millennials and Gen Z don't talk to people, we text people. I mean, I see that as one of the biggest problems facing the hobby. Like, you get your license, and then what? I'm not really interested in talking. That was my actual personal experience. I got my ticket. I did a bunch of stuff on local repeaters, and I was like, okay? Question mark. Like, if I have the radio in the car, because it's legal to use an amateur radio, you can even have the mic in your hand while driving. It's actually it is legal to do so, because there's a federal exemption to hands-free laws about this, because amateur radio is considered an emergency service by most places. Sure, like if I'm driving and I want to chat, it's the same as chatting like CB on a long distance drive. But do I want to sit in my apartment and just talk to random people over radio? Especially because radio isn't moderated. I've heard some incredibly fascinating. Um, I've heard a lot of really fascinating political takes on amateur radio. I think that's the most generic and best way I can put it. There's a lot of interesting data stuff you can do over amateur radio, but realistically speaking, packet modes died 20 years ago. What's left in packet is the few diehards that do it over HF and APRS. The other major advantage of this is because APRS already has a built-in way of gating to the internet. It's non-local. To go back to the previous example, if I build an internet protocol, if I build this that runs over APRS, APRS traffic will only travel as far as it has to over, assuming you route it right. It will only travel as far as it has to until it reaches an iGate. At that point, it will take the last mile over the internet, which also solves part of the problem. So I could throw up a packet BBS, I don't know, in the cloud, and then anyone with a radio who has access to a local iGate would be able to access that service, and then the whole thing is Part 97 or whatever the local reg is compliant. So that's kind of a win-win-win-win where I'm coming from. And this is something that has bugged me for a really long time on amateur radio. Since I'm still not completely sure it's actually going to work, but I certainly want to actually try it. Okay. Like, to give you an actual example, let me actually pull up APRS-FI. And now you see that I'm in Vancouver because it auto-located. So, just to give you an example, so here in New Westminster, there's this iGate run by Victor Echo 7, November, Washington, Charlie. If I were, say, I don't know, it's Canada. Finding civilization is actually surprisingly hard. Um, but say that I was up here in the national park. How far is that? That's probably about 50. Yeah, that's about 50 miles. Oh, okay, let's not do that. That's going to cause a lot of lag. Can we zoom in, please? So that's the basic notion. Like, if I can reach this iGate, I can reach the internet. But iGates don't transmit general internet traffic. They only transmit APRS traffic to the internet backbone. So if I can route it through APRS IS, it provides end-to-end connectivity. Like, I could then have like my bulletin board system hosted in the cloud, and I can access it if I can reach here, if I can reach here, if I can reach here, so forth, so on. On HF, then your distances now become hundreds of miles, and you start to see the full everything involved. I think I'm starting to hit my limit. We're coming up on 2.5 hours. I'm just kind of brainstorming loudly here, and I think in a little bit I actually really want to play Space Age. Um, Yeah, I think I'm actually going to wrap this up here right now because I think I've got enough to make myself happy. I do want to do additional coding, but I want to think on this more before I actually start writing more code. I also am going to need a way to basically test this, and I think I'm going to need to set up the Linux AX25 stack. I think it's the easiest way to do it. Hey, Goff Alice. I don't know what you're thanking me for, but I don't know. The idea of being able to have bulletin boards, emails, you could even like the absolute win I would be see here is if you could basically have amateur radio Usenet. Oh yeah, Gaffa. Oh, thank you. No, you're welcome. Um, the real bandwidth is that TCP/IP. It's bandwidth conservation. It's not tying up the entire frequency, and this also has the advantage that multiple users can use the same frequency at the same time. In traditional amateur radio packet, each frequency can only have one client at a time. In theory, you can now have dozens of clients per local area network. Well, Goff Alice, you could entirely do Mastodon through this. You would just have to. I mean, you could just actually route. If you get rid of everything else, you could just send activity pub that way. Basically, terminate the activity pub at the I gate, send activity pub data over RF, and then have the client handle all the information that does it. Like, that would be completely viable to make that work. Um, the only problem with doing Mastodon over amateur radio is you actually run into problems with the third-party messaging rules. Um, I don't know what the regulations are in Canada. In the United States, only one side of the conversation has to be licensed. That those are rules that go back to what are known as auto patch systems, and if you know what that is, you are of a certain age. So if you're a U.S. ham, you could, as long as you're not doing encryption, you could easily you could do Mastodon. Hold on, I have to. Yeah, no, because you do actually have a problem with third-party trafficking rules. Like, if you had a Mastodon instance that was only licensed amateurs, you don't have any legal problems because it's ham-to-ham contact. God, that's a sentence. That is a legitimate sentence, ham-to-ham contact. But in theory, there's nothing stopping you from doing it. It's similar to how you can send and receive email over APRS, but it also has a really big thing about the regulations involved with that. Ham-to-ham combat. So what you're saying is I need to try play RuneScape over a radio link. Which, what scares me is it might actually work. At least RuneScape Classic might actually run on the type of bandwidth you can do over amateur radio. Because basically, if I didn't build it on top of APRS, I'd have to reinvent the internet gate wheel. And APRS is supposed to be a generic packet system. The speed of this, the packet, each individual packet would be transmitted at 1200 baud. That's the de facto standard used by APRS. There has been some efforts in the past to do it 96,000, 9,600, which for a long time was the legal limit. The FCC killed that rule off last year, but hams haven't really done all that much with it yet. There is VARA, which is the new Shiny protocol that came out a few years ago, which in theory can go into the kilobits range. I believe it can go to. I believe it tops out at about 5 kilobits on HF, and I'm assuming it goes a lot faster at VHF. But if you're doing something like a bulletin board system where each node is aware of every other node, so it can bulk download messages, that's not going to be a big deal because basically you could model it as UUCP links where each node goes to each node and downloads files. In fact, the very first thing I might try doing with this is sending UUCP information from node to node, because that should be about as simple as it gets. Because both news groups and email can be serialized as UUCP spools, and then I can transmit the spool. I can transmit the spool over JRT, so you now have you basically have basic email and news groups, and you could also do this over LoRa. Down in Portland, let me go find it. There is actually, I saw this the other day. I think it's this one here. Yeah, there's this station here. This is Kilo 17 Oscar Echo Kilo. This is LoRa APRS, so this would also work over LoRa. Simply LoRa transmissions on each end, and then you just need to have iGate functionality. Actually, you have it right here. Like, this would work over LoRa as is. Yeah, actually, that would be actually quite simple to make that work. Because then you could use LoRa. You wouldn't even need a license for that. I believe LoRa is a unlicensed service, right? I've never actually played with it. Yeah, this would work perfect for LoRa, actually. But I mean, this is the whole point of amateur radio, is to experiment. Is my screen not updating? My screen is not updating. Because that's not what I'm looking. That's not what I'm seeing on my screen. Why? Oh, that's weird. I clicked the little thing that said show cursor, and now it works. An excellent chef. LoRa is it's not AI. It is long. It's long range. It's a long range wide area network. It is a proprietary standard. I didn't actually know that. But like I said, there are people that connect it. Okay, so now the map is updating. Yeah, so I spotted this on the map when I was looking at the stuff in Portland Metro, and like I said, you have a LoRa APRS beacon or station that's an iGate. So as long as I had a LoRa transmitter, this would work over that. I mean, it's just APRS. You can literally see all the radio stations. Like, if we click this one, you can also see like the ranges that it's hearing stuff. Like, this station is, oh, that's neat. All the stuff's in metric. No, I'm used to this website being in imperial, but I guess because I'm currently in Canada. But yeah, I mean, 16, 20, 25 stuff. All right. I will almost certainly do more coding work on this later, but I think this is where I'm going to end it for now. So this is your host, KD2JRT/VE7, signing off for now. I will catch you all a little later. I will likely be streaming Space Age a little later today. Yeah. Goth Alice definitely will be... I mean, I can reach Vancouver Island with my home setup. I've actually heard the local repeater network, 2 hops. So, weirdly enough, the Salem network and the Vancouver one, I got Prop E. I was watching the Prop E transmission. I actually was seeing packets from Salem make it all the way to Vancouver Island. So, alright. This is N Commander signing out, wishing you all a pleasant day.